So first, I'd like to ask you some questions about Consulting Resource Group, CRG. A bit about what is CRG all about? Why does it exist? And how did you get involved and become the president and CEO?
Well, CRG actually was founded by Dr. Terry Anderson. He was a professor at a local university. And many of us are familiar with, psychological tools, assessments like DISC or Myers-Briggs. And so he was using some of those tools in his psychology courses. And he said, you know what, I think I can do a better job. I think I have some concerns with them. And so here is a different option for me. And what he did is he created our first tool, which is the personal style indicator, actually 40 years ago this year while we're recording this. So it started with the personal style indicator, and then it evolved from there into additional tools, and people wanted to buy it. And he never really intended to have a publishing company, but it was just so well done and so well received and so well thought out that here we are 40 years later in 12 languages, 30 countries. That was the birth of the personal style indicator. And of course, from there, Terry was a real networker. So his whole goal was, okay, how could we develop the whole person? So what are some other things that he was looking at or considering? And as a result of that, then we added, the values and the sales and the leadership and the self-worth and the wellness, and on it went into, 10 core assessments. I came across Terry at, oddly enough, a chamber event in 1989, 1990. I had just started my own sales training company and came across Terry at this networking event. And within 2 weeks, we were sort of sharing an office. It was fortuitous. I mean, you talk about a single event that changed the entire trajectory of my life. It was that meeting with Terry. We're both in the same city, didn't know each other, but as a result of that, became friends. He was best man at my wedding just a few years after that. And so I got to know about the tools. I became the VP of marketing for the company. But then I got a very large contract with a large organization. It was actually with Chrysler Canada. And we started to use the tools, and I got so busy with the contract that I couldn't fulfill my obligations at CRG. And so I became a CRG associate, which is what you are, Ryan, with us, in that I started to use the tools and resources in the solutions that we were designing as an instructional designer for Chrysler. And they were always the highest rated courses we ever did. So when we the personal style indicator for leadership and communications and for service, we use the sales style indicator for the sales team. We use the leadership skills for the managers, and on it went. And then we designed an HR program for them as well. So I was busy being an associate, one of the top 3 in the world as far as how many CRG tools we're using. And then 9/11 happened. And a week after 9/11, my contract with Chrysler was canceled. So we had 12 full-time people that were working around the company, but just that event triggered it. Now, in many ways, it was a very good thing for me because I was on the road 250, 300 days a year for over 6 years, and I was tired of traveling. And so as a result of that, the opportunity to buy CRG came up. And then that was the transition to go from basically a speaker who was doing some writing to change my mindset to be an author who was going to do some speaking. And so I spent the next 10 years revising, updating all the content at CRG.
That's great. You mentioned one of your books, Why Aren't You More Like Me? And I have it right here. I want to put myself now in the shoes of a participant in this event in Winnipeg on April 29th. And there's the opportunity for a few lucky people to get a copy of this book. And there's also the opportunity for the first 15 people who register to get the personal style indicator online. So if I'm a participant and I know I'm going to sit down, I'm going to hear from Dr. Keis, and I got in early, I have a personal style indicator completed, and I may win this book, what kind of experience am I going to get for that person who's the early registrant and might take that book away as well?
Well, the research is clear, Ryan, of course, and I have 100% bias. I'm not hiding anything here. The research is clear is that only 2% of the population will realize their potential without the knowledge of personal style. And once people understand, and it's interesting, you've come to our training and you've shared with us just the power of that event, is once people understand the difference of how the personal style indicator is put together, then we'll have about an 80 or 85% switch rate. So you will be there to be able to get to know self. And when we think about the word insights, which we were talking about earlier, or self-awareness, is the personal style indicator will anchor you in that area or emotional intelligence, as well as just about any other tool in the marketplace. And so now you're starting to get consciousness about yourself. Then you're starting to get awareness about others as you interact. Life is about being successful with other people. There's very few people that are successful on their own in a little island. And so that is going to be a model, a framework, a report that's going to transform your life. Even if you've taken other tools, it's going to go and take you to, in my opinion, to another level or another perspective, whatever way you want to look at. And then what we're going to talk about, because of the time that we have, is really talk about some concepts such as credibility and where does it come from? What does it mean? Why is credibility important, in life, personally and professionally? Have an interactive session. So, we're not going to be there and just talking for the whole time. We want to be able to get you engaged, get you thinking. Adults learn by participating. And so we'll make sure that that happens as part of that process. And if they want to have a sidebar conversation with me, I'm not going anywhere afterwards to say, okay, how does this apply? How would this fit for me or my team or my organization or even my family?
You sound like a man who has a lot of vision and a lot of things going on. And you talk about how the Chrysler contract was there and it was fruitful, but it might have been in the way of other ideas, which makes me think of you as an author. Is that something that was always kind of burning in the back of your mind or something in your heart that was unfulfilled? How do you get to where you are today, having several books?
Well, that is actually a mystery, Ryan. And here's why. Because in grade 9, my English teacher said I would never amount to anything because I have mild dyslexia. So spelling, she said, you can't spell, you can't write. And then when I did my master's degree in the 90s, that's when I really started to develop my writing skill, being on a computer, the invention of a program called Word that put, little red lines underneath all the misspelled words. So all of that assisted in my ability to write. I believe if computers weren't invented, I would not be a writer. So I can think through my fingertips. I don't know how that happened, but I started to write all these papers. My master's degree was a project-based. It was like an executive MBA, went into class once a month, and then I would write usually a 20 to a 60-page paper for every module. Well, that started to develop my writing skills. And then I was doing all this speaking for Chrysler, but we were designing all the courses. So all the course development required writing, starting to move into it. I'm not saying that it's my favorite thing, Ryan. But I realized that it was what I wanted to do. And so now being a communicator and writing, what I tended to do is to write about those things I enjoyed. So I had a weekly article I put out for 10 years, but I would only write. I wrote on Monday mornings and I wrote on whatever I felt like at that time. So it wasn't like a pre-described, here's the editorial list. No, it's just whatever happened, maybe on an event that week. And so I started in that process. Now, developing the tools and going through all the pages, yeah, that was research-based. My first book, Why Aren't You More Like Me, is really another version of, it's the third edition of a book that my partner had written before. And so I said, I'm going to do my take on it. The company needed to support the personal style indicator. The deliberate leadership was a partnership with another partner who does leadership training in law enforcement. And then the purpose book was really my purpose is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. So really the Quest for Purpose was bringing together all of that work so that people would have a roadmap so they could realize their potential in life and discover their purpose and then live it out. So, I don't claim that I'm anything special at all. I grew up on a dairy farm. That's so when you think about agricultural roots, I learned how to work hard from that environment. But really, it was just, okay, we've gone through this track, and writing is a place to be heard. And, my encouragement, social media, of course, everybody shares their opinion. Very few have wisdom, but everybody else has opinion now. So that's part of that process of how could you be a thought leader and develop the content and refine all the work that really Dr. Anderson started. And then we just continued from that point after I bought the company from him in 2002.